a board chair. So the floor is now open for nominations for board chair. Peter.
Thanks. Before I get to a nomination, I thought it'd be important just to review with the board the role of the board chair. And if you sort of look at our policy, kind of one of the main things that a lot of the topics cover is that the role of the board chair is really to lay the groundwork for and run a fair, open, and efficient meeting. That's how we spend the majority of our time together. What's sort of unstated in our policy, but is looked at by the Vermont School Boards Association as well as an important role of the chair, is to be the liaison between the administration, mainly the superintendent, and the school board. I also thought it would be important to recognize what the board chair doesn't do in the role. Board chair does not direct the superintendent. And the board chair does not take action that the board has not authorized. I always think it's important to review those as we move forward. That really, the board directs what the board's going to do. Like I said, sort of say that as a bit of a foundation to nominate Victoria Jetty as our board chair. Having watched Victoria chair our meetings occasionally, but more importantly, the facilities committee, I really feel very confident in her ability to excel in the responsibilities that the board chair has, but also to very much respect its limitations. So with that, I nominate Victoria Jetty as board chair.
All right, thank you. So we have Victoria Jetty nominated for board chair. Do I hear other nominations for board chair?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Chip Malcolm at this point. I think he has a great amount of history in terms of education. He's a leader. And I think he'll do things that are absolutely necessary to control what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Chip Malcolm.
Can I decline that? Respectfully decline it, Brian. I did it for a long time during a time of turmoil with building, and I really enjoyed being on the board, but I'm not looking to be the board chair.
I will withdraw.
Thank you for
Thank you. So here are other nominations for board chair. Okay, with that, all in favor of Victoria Jetty as board chair signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays. Abstentions. Passes. Over to you.
Wow, imagine that.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate Peter's kind words. And I look forward to the work that we are all going to engage in going forward. Especially look forward to embarking on the important work of the strategic plan for equity. And the work of continuing to support our schools, our teachers, our staff, our students, as we emerge from the challenges of the pandemic and face the challenges of emerging from the pandemic. So thank you very much. I guess from here, and I'm also very thankful that I have two past board chairs on the current board, so that when I start to veer in the wrong direction in terms of protocol or anything else, they can give me a little nudge.
I'm so sorry to interject, but we did not go around with introductions for the beginning, and I just feel like, particularly for the recording, it would be helpful if any folks do.
So as my first act as chair, why don't you go around and do introductions? We can start at the end of the table here.
I am Henry Carpenter, student representative to the board.
Peter Conlon.
Suzanne Buck. Victoria Jetty.
Chip Malcolm.
Jen Newseater,
Jamie McCallum.
Brian Bauer, Middlebury.
Daria Sanzelli, student representative to the board.
Barbara Wilson,
Joanna Doria.
Mary Gill,
Steve Warzak.
Mary Heather Noble.
Peter Burrow, superintendent.
Will Hatch, technology director.
And Lindsay's up there.
Oh, is
Oh.
Lindsay up?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, good.
Can you hear us, Lindsay?
Oh, there she is. Do you want to introduce yourself, Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hescock, and I was having trouble logging in, and yeah, it seems like I missed a lot in 5 minutes. Like, so we skipped introductions and went right to elections. Okay, well, all right.
I guess so, yes.
So did I miss the entire election in 5 minutes?
No, we went from electing the board chair to introductions, which were partway through, and we'll get to vice chair and clerk in just a moment. And for those of you who are new to the owl is the camera. So when you're speaking, the tendency is to look at the screen, but in fact, it gets just half of your face. So when we do introductions and stuff, it's helpful to look at the owl. Just as an FYI. If we can start back in the back corner there.
Hi, I'm Kelly Landwehr. I'm the lead school nurse at ACSD and COVID coordinator.
I'm Christina Johnston, principal at Waybridge.
I'm Nicole Carter, Director of Equity and Student Services.
Kirk Broderson, Middlebury.
Verity Sears, currently individual societies teacher at the high school.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
Hugh McLaughlin, Middlebury and substitute teacher.
Great, and do we have, other than Lindsay, do we want to?
I'll go down.
Do you want to go down? That'd be great.
So virtually we have Courtney Cron, Dee Bertolf, Emily Blistein, Gail Leach, James Nedu, Julie Altimos, Linda Barrett, Logan Price, MCTV, Ruth Shattuck Bernstein, Sharon Fletcher, Stacy Rainey, and Tanya Scuteri.
Great, thank you. So now I will open the floor to nominations for vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Mary Heather.
I would like to nominate Suzanne Buck for vice chair. Suzanne has a lot of experience with ACSD and experience in board service in general, and I think it's important to have someone from one of our outer communities on the executive committee in that leadership role. And I think she's definitely demonstrated a commitment to ACSD, and I encourage you to support that.
Great, thank you. Other nominations for vice chair?
Yeah, raise your hand on the screen.
Oh, Lindsay.
I would like to nominate Barb Wilson for vice chair. I agree having someone from outside of Middlebury, one of our smaller schools, on the executive committee would be very helpful. And she's shown that she has time and an interest in digging deeply into the questions at hand. And so I'd like to nominate her to serve on the executive committee as vice chair.
Thank you. Are there other nominations for vice chair? Okay, if there are no other nominations, we'll close the nominations. And Suzanne and Barb, do you both consent to your nomination? Great. Just making sure. So when we have two, let's see, we go with the first, we do the first one who was nominated first.
I think what we have typically done in the past is use paper ballots.
Okay.
We have paper?
Which can just be passes of paper.
Okay,
Is that
I'll
correct?
see if I
We've
have
done
some that
both.
don't have.
We've done voice vote and.
Okay, well, no, up to the discretion of the chair.
I'll get some paper.
I see no reason to have paper ballot.
Yeah, I think we can do voice
Sure.
vote.
Oh, forget it, Caitlin.
Maybe,
Forget it. Maybe.
I mean, you could ask the candidates their preferences.
Typically, the board would decide whether
Okay,
the board itself decides to do voice vote or paper ballot.
Yeah, and I guess somebody would need to call for a paper ballot,
Okay, are there any
I was not
calls for a
calling for
paper
it.
ballot? If there's no call for a paper ballot, we'll go by voice vote. I don't hear,
It'd like to be a hand
How
raise, we
does
can have-
Lindsay?
so, I'm
I
sorry.
just wondered if a virtual person could participate in a paper ballot.
Oh, that is a very good point. It would be really hard. I don't think we have that technology.
Good, but it would
Although
take till next week.
We do have that technology. We have a fax machine, but we don't have one of those here. Okay, so why don't we'll do a voice vote, but if you're voting yay, please raise your hand as well so that we can count. And we'll start with the first nomination. So if I can have all those in favor of Suzanne Buck for vice chair, say aye. And those opposed, say nay.
Hand raised.
So 1, 2. Am I voting?
You can vote.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so the ayes have it, and Suzanne Buck is elected vice chair. All right, on to clerk. I will open the floor for nominations for clerk. Jen.
I would like to nominate Mary Heather Noble for clerk, if she is willing. I've served on 2 committees with her that she has been the voluntary note taker for, and her notes seem to capture the conversation appropriately. And I think she's meticulous enough to get the details, but not, sort of take away from her being able to contribute to the meetings. So I would like to nominate Mary Heather, please.
Great. There's a nomination of Mary Heather for clerk. Are there any other nominations? All right. Congratulations, Mary Heather. You are now clerk. All right. I guess our next order of business is if I could have a motion to appoint Connor Sousa as truancy officer. Moved by Suzanne Buck. Can I have a second, please? Steve Borzak. Is there any discussion on appointing Connor Sousa truancy officer? He has been our truancy officer. I don't know, Peter, if you want to speak a little bit to this position.
Yeah, our SRO has been, and before Connor, it was other SROs have been our truancy officer every year. So it's something we just have consistently done for many, many years.
Right. It's not really a vote because there aren't any other options. All right, so all those in favor of appointing Connor Sousa truancy officer, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Motion passes. And on to establishing our regular board meetings. So historically, we have been meeting the second and fourth Mondays of the month. My recommendation would be to continue that unless anyone has some hard and fast reason why they know they cannot attend the second and fourth Mondays of the month. Does anyone?
Well, I'll go ahead and move that we establish our regular board meeting date and time as the second and fourth Mondays of the month at 6:30 p.m.
I second.
Terrific. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. So at this point in time, we will have public comment. This is something that we do at every meeting. We start by asking the public in the room whether or not they wish to speak. Please raise your hand if you do. And then we will get to those on Zoom. So is that you, Kurt?
My name is Kirk Roberson. I'm the Executive Director of Middlebury Community Television. I saw on the agenda that one of your tasks tonight is to appoint the ACSD board representative to the MCTV board. So I'm here to answer questions about that at that point. And thanks.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Is there anyone on Zoom who cares to make a public comment? Please raise your Zoom hand and we'll select you.
Betty Kafumbe.
Betty.
My old friend.
Betty, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Oh, just
Very
barely.
quietly.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better.
Okay. How's everyone doing?
I'm missing you. Thanks for checking in.
Yeah, congratulations to the new board members. And Mike, I wanted to make a public comment regarding our teachers at MOMS, hoping that we will do some really good work checking in on teachers and finding ways to engage teachers. I feel like, especially at the middle school, finding ways to take care of them. Yeah, just caring for their mental, emotional, and social well-being. Because they've been through a lot recently, and I've heard a lot of motivation to continue, teaching. From some of them, just wanting to leave something that they've been doing for a long time and something that they've found, pleasure in over the years. And to hear such comments, it breaks my heart. And hopefully we'll find ways, together and how we can support them more, and not just at the middle school, but, doing regular check-ins and engaging them more, having more of their voice. Yeah, so I hope the new board and we'll have more of these conversations involving teachers. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Betty. Is there anyone else on Zoom? I think, we're seeing it. Okay, so.
Question?
Yes.
I basically have a concern. How many people are actually listening to this board in the public? I don't know. And do you people know how many people are actually zooming in here?
We can see on there how many people are zooming in.
Exactly, and that's my point.
Not a lot.
It would seem that the board would want to push this issue, that more people are able to get in and want to get in and make comment. And I don't see it happening. I didn't see it happening when I was waiting to introduce myself at a previous meeting. And I'm wondering if there can be any connection through MCTV, that if somebody watching that on the educational channel can make a comment that is then directed to the board. I mean, you have to open this up so that more people are involved.
Mary Heather, do you want to-
Yeah, just to respond, I mean, some people may not participate live because there's a scheduling conflict, or many people, families, and are feeding their kids, or, helping them with homework right now. MCTV does make our board meetings on public on their website, all the recordings, and all of our recordings are also available on our website. And people do have the opportunity to watch those recordings, and then, of course, if they have any concerns or comments, can contact us.
Is that point made so that people watching will hear, yes, we really want to hear from you after you have watched this program? Is that being stressed? Because the public out there needs to have as much information as possible. And there has to be ways of facilitating that. I have done programs on MCTV myself, and it's a great avenue to get to people. And I'd like to see that reinforced.
Maybe coming up in the agenda, you might want to be our liaison. Board. but we'll get to that in a moment. First, oh, Lindsay.
Careful.
Lindsay, did you have a question?
I see Jamie McCallum in the list of attendees. I don't think you guys have the list of attendees there. Can we bring him over as a panelist?
Jamie McCallum is here in person.
The other Jamie's here.
Oh, there's two Jamie McCallums?
It might be someone in his household tuning in to see him on TV.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can't actually see anybody except for, I guess you can see what I can see, but I didn't see who was there, so I apologize. I was just going by the name.
That's okay. Thank you for checking in.
Victoria, one thing about the meeting owl is it tries its hardest to move around the room when it hears a voice, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
So.
But we did go with this technology, as was explained to us when we first got it, because the microphone is better than other technology. And so it was decided that we would rather have the public be able to hear us well than see us well.
And we talked to Kurt about it as well, and it's what they use at town offices, I think, still.
Right. Okay, with that, let's move on to the Waybridge.
Yes, so Christina Johnston is here to present about all the great things that are happening at Waybridge.
Where should I be?
You can be wherever you'd like to
Wherever
be. Where would you like to go?
Well, I want to be able to see people.
How about up, right up over here is probably
Right up
good.
over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is quite an event, I have to say. At 77, coming here after, this will be my 27th year of principalship. Haven't been up before the board for quite a while. And so it was like, what to do? And then I was so excited. It's like you're coming together as a new board at this point as well. So I thought that's really good. It made me think about my presentation differently. In the past, I've come with students and they've been really in charge of the presentation. And I also was like, those presentations, as lovely as they are and as sort of intensely involved as our children are in other things, it's like that's may not be the best use of their time right now. And I also really was looking forward to an opportunity to talk about Waybridge from our perspective, and why it works as well as it does. So that's our logo, and I started with the quotation from Elie Wiesel, which is one of my dearest and sort of guiding quotations that I work with both at Waybridge and at the college that I use with my classes. You'll notice the term about human is there, that to stay and become more human. And you'll notice that throughout the presentation. So it's human and cows. And that's right, the cows are significant because they're right next to our playground, and probably the high point of a recess has been watching a calf being born. So it's right there, the whole cycle is right there. I have, this particular slideshow is text heavy, which isn't necessarily the best model, but I want to give you some time to read this piece and the next piece, and then we'll talk. People had enough time? Okay. So this particular piece, I did ask Jen last week if you were going to talk about Waybridge, what would you say? So it was a solicited piece. I didn't expect her to write this piece. I thought we were going to have a conversation. But anyway, that's Jen for you as well. Since she sat down and wrote this, and it captured a great deal of what I think all of the teachers feel at the school. The next day, when I got home from from school, I got this particular note spontaneously, which also captures the feel of the school. And just as a personal aside, that is Elizabeth's photograph as well. She has a very wonderful eye. So one of the pieces that's been really a guiding light, and for me, you'll notice that the date on the book is 1999. I came to Waybridge in 93, and this is a book that's been really part of my thinking for quite a long time, and something that the faculty, the full staff, everybody thinks about is that whatever we do, and it's by the hair, what's happening to our hair, certainly our expressions, every detail of us is being watched all the time. Very particularly, how do we interact with each other? How do we interact with the students in the classroom? Are there some that are favorites and some that aren't so favorite? Or watching all of that piece that they're determining that. And so our job, and really one of our missions is to be sure that our interactions are those we want for our children and that this is what we want them to see and model after. That takes discipline and care, but that's a really guiding light for the school. So another piece of reading, and this is from, I've taken from what Ed said, which is a wonderful site that I learned through IB. And this is a piece that we have referred to in our staff meetings. So coming out of that same series of blog entries that what Ed says was this idea of what the common characteristics of a cohesive community. As you're looking at it, I think comparing it or thinking about how it relates to the IB learner profile as well. So at the staff meeting today, I shared the slideshow with the staff and we looked at this list because an ideal thing with this list is that you develop it as a community. And we had talked about this list, but then it was like, which of these things seems the most important to how vibrant and how well we work together. And the first piece that came out was mutual trust, which is something that I think is really an important piece of what's happening or not happening within schools. The other one that came up right away was non-judgmental acceptance, appreciation of each other, and the final one, playfulness. We have extraordinary amount of laughter that goes on in the school every day, students and adults. More reading. There's a break soon. So again, connected with everything else I presented is the idea that we can have school rules, school agreements, they can be up on the wall, but the part of really having a culture shaped is the idea that we're behaving in a particular way and repeated behaviors in a particular way that allow people to know who we are and for us to know who we are, that this is the way we do things. And that's a big difference that gets confused about living ideas as opposed to having words on the wall, which is quite common and also become points of discipline. And that's not the point of how you change culture. So what does it look like at school? And what are some things that in that community, which has deep trust in it and openness, and another terminology that came up was vulnerability, although it's an overused term, people really feel the capacity to do that, is something that I think sometimes people think, oh, combined classrooms, terrible thing. Not so. We really value them. They're valued in literature as well, in research literature and some wonderful educational literature that I'm happy to share. If you don't know anything about me, I'll hand you a book. But at any rate, we have combined classrooms. I don't know how long we had combined classrooms, but it was well before I came. And we've always done it that way. The piece that's wonderful about them, especially when you can be quite consistent about what the combinations are, is the kindergartners get to see what it's done, how it's done by the first graders. The first graders get to be the people who are leading the way and directing and pushing ahead. And that's a really wonderful thing in content areas as well as in developing a social community. So this year we have K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The teachers, it's not necessarily an easy thing to hop into. We have one teacher who's never taught combined classrooms again, but she's doing it. She comes from a system that was single grade. But what that means is that we really learn the standards at an expanse that's not limited to grade. So we know what came before, how the concept was developed, and we know what's going to come after. We have to do that even if it was single grade. It just extends that. The concepts aren't discrete. They're continuous. So learning how to work with those has become pretty much second nature to the teachers, and overall increases their capacity to really good pedagogy. And we can just go through these. I did put in classroom exploration is frequent. I use this expression of a habitat for wonder coming from a wonderful Australian educator, Kath Murdoch. And the link is on the slideshow if you want to pursue that video. It's really lovely, breath of fresh air. Okay. So besides combined classrooms and having exploration in the classrooms throughout the day, we also have 9 recesses a week, a half hour each of those. This is almost the most important thing that happens at Waybridge. It's really significant. It makes a break, which is incredibly important for our health and our brains. It's taking us outside, and it's completely open play. Doesn't mean, and I shouldn't have you think that Waybridge is heaven all the time. We have our contentions, we have our conflicts, we have all of that. But there's this time for exploration and really, as I say here, mucking about, which we're doing as educators, I have to say. We're trying stuff. So this is infamous stream. We've actually changed the course of the stream over the years, and just really having a great time. Lovely things from sometimes kindergartners, and usually they're young girls with their pink outfits in the beginning of the year. Stop wearing pink outfits too far into the year. Other aspects of the playground that I think are significant. The picture below where the cones have turned into megaphones, which I thought was, just a lovely, here's a found thing, and it changed the play. But open-ended play. I put the picture of the Beaver Lodge there because that was designed by children and executed with the help of a local construction or carpenter, and it's really odd looking, really odd looking. But it came out of designs that we did through engineering, And one of the reasons I put it here is that there's risk involved in it. That it's totally designed in terms of height and all of that, and nobody can get their head stuck. But it doesn't look like a regular climbing structure. The beauty of it is, unlike designer playground pieces, you have to look where you're stepping. You have to plan your ascent and your descent. And that's one of those things that having people really stay in tune with what they're doing and in touch with what they're doing, as opposed to it becoming automatic as standardized playgrounds set you up for. It also has many uses to it that you could never imagine when it was built. The first day I got back this year, the students rushed out for their first recess, and the 5th grade girls put their hands under the tires, and from the spring, they had stored beautiful cut grass under the tires on the edge. And they said they had this whole stash. Who thought that that would be what they would do with those? But it was really a fascinating one. And then, of course, there's all sorts of collaboration that goes on. Some adult facilitated sometimes if it gets to a place that isn't being resolved well, but mostly just what students are doing. And then there's the whole part of design, found materials, being able to be very creative. And they can take months to complete and be part of the playground. So it's just found materials. I put up there the Happy, Healthier, Smarter, which is coming out of research that's done by Cheryl. And there's a whole set of research about people who have access to outdoors, that they tend to be healthier, they tend to be happier. And when I say smarter, which is always a term I'm very cautious of using, I don't actually like it, but it's the terminology that she was using, is that they actually score better if you're interested in scores. So getting outside is not something that is just, when you think that's lovely to do, that's good for the children. It's something that really makes a difference in our health and our well-being and our capacity to score.
Which Antioch is that? Is that?
New England.
All right, not Yellow Springs, Ohio.
No, New England, thank you.
Okay.
I should have put that in, yeah. Okay, yes. Part of recess as well, we have, we really make sure that everybody gets outside every day, but there are some activities that happen during recess that are also open-ended. Legos in the library is every Wednesday, and then any day that it's pouring rain, although we usually go out in the rain. We do have Legos in the library. This is an example of something somebody do. There's just a pile of Legos, and then each child, or sometimes it's groups of children, have a box with their design that they work on over time. There are no kits, not allowed. It's just free-form, make your own design. Highly popular, K through 5, both genders. Yeah. And then on Thursdays, we have makerspace, which is something that we've just developed over time. Megan Sutton is a person who's really key in that. My husband is now a weekly volunteer with it. But students come in and destruct things and construct things. They learned that these really deconstructing something is not the same as destroying it. So they have to sort of figure out how to take things apart so they have the parts to work with when they get finished with that. Completely open-ended, also involves some sewing. We have lots of tools which have come in various ways and did some grants for some work tables. It's one of the risk places again. I'm high on risk. Students need to take risks. It's different from setting them up with hazards. It's like learning how to do things. So they have drills, they have saws, they do all of that. We've had tiny little cuts over the years, little tiny cuts. And these are little tiny kids with big, big equipment. But it's, again, very open-ended and people are really constructing things. Then another aspect, creating community and working together, is a tradition that we have called Gifts for Giving, which is we do the week before the winter vacation. And as you can, it's basically people making gifts of various sorts that community members have planned, and we figured out how to provision it. But it offers something which I think is also really important, and I know this happens in other schools as well, is that there's a ritual that students look forward to. It's part of their school experience. And it also brings community members in. And as you'll notice, there's older children and younger children. The older children go through first on their own, and then they come back with their K-1 buddies and assist them in going through the process.
Question?
Mm-hmm.
When you're referencing those risks, are you talking about taking these kids out of their normal world and allowing them to be in another situation that they have to react to?
Well, ideally, life is that, isn't it? I mean,
Yes, but this is maybe giving them an opportunity to learn how to do these things.
it is. It's setting them up for that it's new experiences using different tools, having an idea that you want to accomplish and figuring out how to do that. And I don't mean to be flip in my answer. I think it's sort of agreeing with you that the piece is we often are protecting children from actually taking risks. This plays out in the classroom as well. Not quite as well. We don't do that as well yet.
So you have them in a secure position in order for them to take risks that they have to work at and be successful with.
And most often in the makerspace or on the playground, it's situations they've created themselves, right? That we're allowing that. I have students today who are setting up an obstacle course. And anybody could say, not that, not that, not that, that's not safe. But the issue is you like challenges. How are you going to make a challenge that's going to be safe enough on the playground? How do you make that decision? And they'll take that on. That's what they're doing. The new thing we've added this year, which I think is just lovely, and I have to thank Laura Lavaca for her incredible support and help with this process. I think we shifted over to food being prepared at Mary Hogan this year, and that was a huge thing. We have this kitchen, and we always had this wonderful smell of food, and it was very central. So it was mourning for people to say that wasn't going to happen. In the discussion of that, we talked about, well, let's have once a month where students are actually making the whole meal. Ideally, we add that in to connect it with the curriculum as much as possible. And I think next year will be even better because it won't be sort of planning this after the curriculum. But again, as Laura says, and as we talk about in makerspace that here, if there's fire and knives, it's fun with kids. So the kindergartners are adept at cutting vegetables and confident to do that. People have made their own dough. For this last time, we made little hand puppet sandwiches, and then each person had dough that they could fill. This time, our next one is pasta making. Everybody's going to make their own pasta, which we'll put into a community pot. So the nurturance of the community, bringing in the community to volunteer, and also just this idea of how does food work? The 4th and 5th graders know how to make several different kinds of dough now for different kinds of pies and breads and so forth. So they have a skill at this point that they can take with them, which is really great. And it's totally fun. I think there's so the other sort of shift is that's our culture. I think you can see by the writing at the beginning and what I was sharing was that the faculty and staff feels really trusting, excited, intellectually challenged, all of these things, and really committed to modeling, really, really wonderful behavior for children to pattern after. And what I wanted to just talk a little bit about is how, some of the elements of that. And one of the books that I've used since its publication, both with college students, but also at the school, current staff hasn't all read it, but that's something that we'll get to. Some of us read it way earlier when it came out, is sort of thinking about how do you create that culture? So you can move ahead with that. Notice it is a work in progress. Do you want you to take a look at this? So one of the things that I've experienced as principal at Waybridge over time is this idea that people look and they talk about Waybridge. Since I've been, I think before I was here, but I've talked about it. And oftentimes in this sort of the first sentences have dismissed it. They've dismissed it as that's a result of socioeconomic privilege. That's a result of being small. That it's not, in some cases, it's like, that's Christina, that's her school. But it's been sort of thought about as not something other people could do. And actually not looked into because of that. And that's the part that I think is really important. And I am not trying, please be sure, I'm not trying to say Waybridge knows everything. We are mucking about. We have been at least as long as I've been here. That education is human. It's not easy, clear. It takes deep thinking, lots of communication, and lots of trust. Students, families, the staff. So if we're going to do that, what goes into that? We've already talked about some of the things that the staff needs to feel and that the students need to experience. But using this particular book, the 8 forces that will really help change culture, I think it gives a roadmap, at least for things to think about, and that it's really healthy and wonderful if people can sit with and they could choose other frameworks. I'm not just promoting this one. I think it's really excellent, but I think it's really important to be able to think about what goes into creating a quality school, and to invite you not to think about what happens at Waybridge just as a socioeconomic response, and not just as something that has to do with small. Those are luxuries, got it. That's not something I'm denying, but there's also elements that can be looked at and built upon. So just go quickly through the forces. Okay. So first being expectations. Some of these sound like in the language that you hear all the time about schools. The point is to make them living and to be messy with them, think about them. So school is about learning, not work completion. I don't think many people would disagree with that, but a lot of what happens in schools starts looking like work completion. And so thinking about how do you move from that, and then again, going back to the earlier things about our being models for students and that they're watching, is that they're not expectations of the students, but for them and for ourselves. Understanding that language is incredibly important. How we use our words, our physical language, our gesture, etc., but really choosing and thinking about our words as the way we mediate knowledge and understanding and connection with each other. So being very conscious about that. Time, I think, is one of the biggest ones. And I talk about it being perceived to be a scarce commodity. Time is our construct. And we set it up that we're on this digital treadmill. that whole idea, and we're very addicted in classes, wedded to being fast. That's a sign of being really smart. And we love stress. That's also a sign of having importance and significance. That gets communicated to students all the time. So thinking about that's perceived, how can we change that? And then really also thinking about the variation in processing speeds. It's one of the main ways we marginalize children is this difference in processing speeds. We have people who learn like, shoot up your hand, I got the answer, you must be smart. Hands up, mine's down. We really separate people on that basis. Then the thing that came out again with this staff meeting today was taking time for thinking in the classroom, together as staff members with our families, that we can slow ourselves down and really take time to think, not be budgeting all the time. Interactions, keys going back to how students interact with each other and how students and teachers interact with each other. Key, though, starting with that is total respect. No matter what the thought is, it's a wonderful idea. It's not wrong thinking, even if it isn't the place where you think is correct. It's what is thought at that time, and you really need to value that and think about what do you add to the experience so that you can move that thinking differently or move your own thinking differently. The environment being incredibly important. I particularly like that does the space facilitate learners' needs to engage with other learners as being something to consider as you're setting up space. And then related to the outdoors, this is not Richard's work, but this idea of even having windows makes a difference in students' scores. That's really key, having access to nature. Better if they go outside 20 minutes a day at least makes a difference. The other part is just having plants in your room. So that kind of thing of what your environment is, really thinking about that, but keeping daylight and nature in view. And that's the end of the 8 pieces. In thinking about those, this is sort of the quote I come away with, but really inviting you to take a look at what we're doing. It's not my place to invite you into all of the schools, but to certainly come and look and see what we're doing and to think with us about it. We're really interested in that process of thinking together and seeing what we can build together for the quality of education within buildings. So, thank you. Other questions? Thank you for all the time, I suppose. Yes.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. I love it. So I've had the opportunity this year to be in the classroom and sub and that kind of thing. And to be truthful, it's been really sad experience because I see so much strife. And in Waybridge, we've had that, same dynamic where, you have kids reacting to each other in a negative way or refusing to do the work. And as a sub, sometimes I'm paralyzed. It's like, how do I help and move them forward? So I look for a way to engage with them in some, like I made a game for one class, and work to a point, right? So I'm just interested in, what you're seeing in your school and maybe how can we help other schools that have so much, volatility, it seems, to get on a more even keel.
So I can answer for Waybridge. And part of that has to do with the culture that we created. We haven't seen lots of strife. There is a difference for children, for sure. There's a desire for much more physical contact than there has been other years. That's hunger. Yeah. And so that sometimes comes out in more aggressive ways. but it's there. There the interactions among students, partly because they've had some time where they've been really restricted. I mean, I should honor that today it was optional mask day, first day. It was a beautiful thing to behold. People were, like one student came in and said, I can smile. I was like, yeah, I haven't seen that smile for a while. So it was a lovely thing, and the culture between people who make families and made choices about masks as well. I don't have the capacity, or is it appropriate for me to speak about in the moment what can happen for other schools? That's sort of not my intent. But I do think in the big picture, for one thing, creating trust among all people involved in schools is a huge thing. People can be vulnerable in that. People can think together in a different way. That's deep and hard work to do. That's sort of the invitation from my really brief introduction to Ron Richards' book. So I highly recommend thinking in that way. Yes.
Just kind of following up on that, and I appreciate your acknowledging kind of that perception versus kind of what has been taking a lot of work and engineering in the Waybridge community to create a school with a particular culture.
Mm-hmm.
And also acknowledging that the students and families that are part of that don't necessarily have the same struggles that many families and students in our district do. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts in translating some of these sort of lessons learned in Waybridge School to places where the community does provide education and emotional and social services to students who've experienced trauma, who live in poverty. I'm just curious how you think that can be translated to a different sort of learning population, and what kind of tools would be necessary to make it successful.
I can just give a simple answer to that, of course. Good question.
I mean, I know it's a complex question. We could do a dissertation on it, but
what I would say is, for one thing, in terms of history of Waybridge, we do enjoy privilege. When I first came, it was a much more mixed community than it is now. And that was one of the things that was complex about success, was that the housing definitely shifted to who was moving in.
Yeah.
So that is a piece of the puzzle. One of the things I would say is that the research that Ron Richard has done through Harvard is not about schools like ours. It's really thinking about what are the forces of change for culture that can happen anywhere if you think about them. So I sort of think people get into barriers like thinking is my idea of like, how does that work from one place to the next? Is looking at pieces of literature and research like this that's looking at cultures across socioeconomic lines, across racial barriers, et cetera, that's really a part of what they're doing. So not to set that up as how can that not work? I think the other piece that's incredibly important for anything to work really well in schools is that there has to be a really deep trust level with the teachers. And they need to feel trust. Without that, it's really hard to expect change or to do the deep work that needs to happen. And that's a piece that doesn't directly answer your question, but I think it's a condition that needs to be in place. And that's something that, I feel very gratified and appreciate deeply that the teachers really feel that way, that even the new people come in. So that, I could talk for all night, so.
We take two more questions.
Okay, good.
I was noticing in the budget book that you are going from a full-time position this year to half-time next year, and just wondering what you anticipate, the challenges being, or.
Okay. So that's a joke, I would say. I'm half-time this year, Right, it was in the budget as a
Oh,
full-time,
Okay.
but that's like a joke.
I'm not in on it then.
No, the joke
She's got
is,
4 dogs.
I have, so it's worked out really beautifully to be at the college and working with student teachers and in a school. It's like a dream mix for me.
Yeah.
But what I do is go to school first thing in the morning. I'm there until I have a class at the college. I go to my class at college. I love those students that I have. And I come back and I finish the day. So there are times when I'm doing college work at school, but I'm there almost 100% of the time.
At school.
At school. And that's what I'll do next year as well.
And you will.
So I don't mean to be flippant about that either, but it's sort of a hypothetical situation.
Anyone else?
Well, just I'm not in on the joke either. And so, but just, so that means, so what does that mean? Does that mean that, so this thing is not true in the budget book? Like you're not going to be going from a full-time to a half-time?
No, I'm half-time this year.
You're half-time this year?
Yeah.
You'd think I would know, I should have known that. Okay, so then nothing actually changes.
Nothing changes for next year.
Oh, cool.
Was that an oversight in the budget or something?
No, do you want to speak to that, Peter?
I can, yeah, so it was budgeted at 1.0 before Christina
Okay.
took the position.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it just happened to work.
No, just to do
Well, I attended Waybridge School and
We remember.
yeah, and it was, I mean, I want to just thank Christina more than a question because that was just a really, really great experience, which I'm not sure everybody can say about their elementary school experience. And I think it's just like, especially moving from Massachusetts, where the environment was very, very different to Vermont. That was, I mean, the scope of learning there. And I mean, I still, I'm in contact with Megan Sutton, who's the librarian for several of the schools, I think. And, you know, I run into my 6th grade teacher on walks sometimes, and it's just the community that is built there, I think is really, really special. So just a lot to thank for Christina.
But I was watching your smile when I was presenting and appreciating that. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Christina.
Thank you.
I mean, just the depth of your knowledge and your commitment to this community is really unparalleled. So we appreciate you and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. It's a total pleasure to be able to talk about education. I love that. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I think we may want to take her up on the invite.
Yes, it is.
I would
It's a
love to.
genuine invite.
I would
Please
love-
come.
I would love to.
30 hours over an hour.
Okay, moving on. You'll notice on this part of the agenda, it's structured a little bit differently in the past in that it's listed as consent agenda. Basically, that's done just to indicate sort of what the standard action of the board will be each meeting. It's sort of just highlighting what's going to be typical. What it doesn't mean is that I don't think we in the last board had agreed that we like to be able to discuss, make comments about the minutes and have the chair of the finance committee make comment about bills. And so we can still go through these individually, but it's just listed as consent because it's consent agenda because it's something that we're going to see every week. Peter, do you want something to add to that?
Yeah, so as we were building the budget, I kind of threw this out there for the board to try.
The agenda.
Not a budget.
Sorry. For the board to try, because our current agenda shows so many items, some say action, some don't. And typically on almost every agenda, you have a consent agenda with minutes and bills and other things like that within it. So it doesn't mean that the board has to take this as a full package. And I think what we heard previously was, as Victoria said, going one by one, but I thought this was easier way to look at it for the public to see it and access it and understand it. So that's why I went ahead and shifted that, and totally open to going back if the board decides they want to have all those individually without the term consent agenda.
All right, so with that, a motion to approve the minutes of February 14th and February 22nd.
Sure, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Just as a point of discussion, typically if you haven't attended a meeting that we're approving the minutes on, you abstain. So any discussion, question, comments on either of those weeks, Barb?
Sure. On the first week, which was the 14th, I believe, there's a couple typos on the top of the second page. There's not page numbers. There's just like an @ sign E, and I just think a word's missing there. If you look at the very top, it says, how is the culture in the school, ? And then there's the @ sign E, have been in such a difficult time. So somehow it was probably a special character or something took over on the computer. And then the only other thing was down below under the report of the superintendent, or associated with my name, it said, ask, are we looking at data from before the pandemic? I went back and listened to the recording because it didn't make sense to me. And it said, what my question was, are we missing data due to the pandemic? A little slightly different. And then I asked the second question, which then prompted the next paragraph on the next page, was, will we be able to see the impact of the pandemic? Will we be able to see the impact that the pandemic has had? And then Peter responded, not really the purpose of the data, so on and so forth. So just slightly different, but that's all I had.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
This is on the 14th.
On either one, we can use it.
I had a question on the 22nd. I was the one when we were discussing the passage of the facilities master plan. I was concerned there would be no votes. And I wish that they were delineated as to why they were no. And Barb, it's right at the end on the third page. It says Barbara Wilson said that out of respect for the community, she will vote no. And I guess I felt that needed to be elaborated a little better, because I don't understand. I understand where you were coming from, but if you read these minutes, you have no idea what that means, I think. So I don't know how it would be changed, whether you wish to add something to it that would say that you felt that the data was incomplete relative to Shoreham, because you were talking about Shoreham, I presume.
I was talking about all schools, actually. But I mean, there was, several things I brought up. Some of the data is incorrect still in the study. And then really the list of next steps was very limited. And I thought it was important to identify in writing things that were going to be part of that discussion going forward. And so out of respect to the community, because I know others have been talking the same way, it was hard for me to vote yes.
I guess I understand what you're saying, but I thought it should be elaborated to state something different. That's all. And it struck me when I read it. I know why you voted no, but it's not very clear to me in that statement as to why.
Just a quick point of order, and that just so everybody's clear, nobody is obligated to explain their vote. Certainly, if you choose to, you can, but just want to.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Lindsay, thank you. Lindsay.
Okay, I'm unmuted now, I think. I raised my hand when we were talking about the consent agenda. And we previously had agreed that that wasn't the way we wanted to go with this. because it enables us to vote as one for one thing, for multiple items on the agenda, but, so I was wondering why why it appeared on this despite having decided as a group that we weren't going to employ that strategy with our agenda setting. And Dr. Burrows did explain what his thoughts were on it, but I wanted to say that I would hope that we don't have a consent agenda because we always discuss these things and vote on them individually anyway. So it's just like an extra step to ask if we want to vote on them as one unit. Anyways, the minutes are fine, but.
Okay, yeah, I think Peter's point was that they're listed under consent agenda just so that the public knows these are things that we vote on each and every week, but the entire agenda is not a consent agenda. We're not going to vote on the agenda as a whole. We're still going to discuss each point underneath.
I guess I misunderstand how a consent agenda is defined. I was just looking, at how like the school board association defines it, and it just didn't seem to fit with this. So that's why I raised my hand to just question employing that strategy on our agendas. It just seems like it'll take more time in the end, rather than saying, do we want to, vote on all these together? Anyways.
Yeah, we're not going to each and every time ask if we want to vote on them together. I think we'll proceed as normal as we have in the past. It's just an indication to someone from outside looking at our agenda what to expect us to take action on. But if people feel that the word consent, is confusing, we can take that out going forward. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No,
Well, I guess it's just that we had decided we'd had a discussion and decided we didn't want to use it. So maybe we should reopen that discussions, and now that we have a different group of people, if we want to organize it differently.
Okay, first we have a motion on the table to do the minutes. So let's finish the minutes and then we can come back to this discussion. So we've gotten all those in favor of approving the minutes with the corrections, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, great.
Wait.
Abstain, I'm sorry, abstain, any abstentions? Yes, we have Jen, Jamie, Joanna, and Steve, and Brian.
So this is funny with that because I was at one, but I wasn't at the other, but we're voting on them together, but I don't really care. I'll just abstain from both. But that is kind of to Lindsay's point. It's like, it's a little weird to grab them together. We don't normally have.
We don't use.
Agenda. I know. Yeah. Just saying. I only missed Luke's birthday. I didn't miss them both.
Right. Got it. So in terms of, do you want to
Well, we've added for today's, were you guys saying something?
I was just gonna say that if we're gonna open up the discussion about having a consent agenda,
it needs to be on the
it should be an agenda item.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I think the intention of this is not to have a consent agenda, but we can discuss in executive committee whether or not we want to add that to a future agenda to rehash whether or not we want to shift to a consent agenda. That sound good?
Or just rename this category.
Or just rename this
recurring vote items or whatever you're calling
Yeah.
it.
Joanna.
Should I save my question for discussion during consent agenda?
If it's about discussing whether we're to have a consent
No,
agenda.
it's just a question about what professional appointments means.
We're going to get there. Right
We haven't seen that before either. So.
Okay, moving on to the bills.
All right, the bills, just to quickly go over what we are required to do, the board, and we'll sign some papers later in this meeting that states that 2 board members have to review the bills. There's a stack of bills about this high most every 2 weeks. This is a big district. This is a $42 million budget. There are lots of bills, many of them quite small, and get accumulated into one check paid to whoever it is. And now that we have food service, there's even more. Generally, we've shared this, although over the last few years, because of COVID, we've done this electronically at a lot of the time. where the bills are delineated and we look at them generally and then sign off on them, which we have to do. And we are signing off as representatives of the board so the bills can be paid. Any questions we have, we'll ask the person who, Melissa in the office, who works on that part. It's a little tedious, but it's also, I think those of us who do it every 2 weeks, you get to know what you know all the time, and then there's the one that comes up, and so you call and say, what's this company for $10,000 or whatever. In any case, my preamble. So there are 2 sets of bills. The first were read on the 28th, and they're vouchers. First payroll voucher is for $466,547.57. The second payroll voucher is for $845,313.30. We don't look at every payroll, we look at just the voucher on payroll. We do look at the other bills. And then out of the general fund, there's $281,412.28. You can see they're delineated here. Today, the bills were read again by 2 of us, myself and Barb. I think you read them last time too, but 28, I don't remember. But the first voucher, the first warrant is for out of the general fund for $315,242.65. There's a payroll voucher of $829,362.20. And there's a check written out of the McGilton Fund for $319.50. All the bills by both of us reading them are okay. I move that they be approved.
For the second, Barb. All those in favor, or any discussion, questions?
Is it really in paper in the sky still, or are you still doing it electronically?
I was there
Barb
today.
Barb
I
goes
go
in
there.
and
I go there.
she goes reads them
Awesome.
live.
It's like-
Awesome, yeah,
yeah.
well.
Well, I mean, it's just cool that you still have the paper, like you can go through the
She
steps.
can go through
Yeah.
it, but that means you gotta go through 75,000 credit cards.
That's right.
$4
Yeah.
4 cents.
You should see the Amazon bill.
Yeah, it was small this time. It was
Yeah.
really-
In any
I was
case,
so happy.
yes.
there's some paper.
Barb always done them a lot, has elected it to do it that way. I did it that way for a long time, and I've elected to do it this way and ask questions if I have any questions.
Thank you.
So all those in favor of approving the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Any?
Same folks, I assume?
Oh, yeah.
Do they have to?
No, they don't have to.
Okay, come on.
You can.
That's true, yes.
Isn't that great? More bills.
Work
to
it
pay.
over.
You are paying the bills.
Yeah.
You do live in this district.
You are paying the bills. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. You're abstaining, Brian?
I wasn't involved with it.
Okay, so moved. Next is professional appointments. This is something that historically has gone just to the chair to sign. It's basically signing off on the hiring of all licensed employees. So you'll see in the meeting materials, the name and I think their FTE. So
Position and location.
their position and location. So we're not going to go through and discuss each one. We just approve them as a whole. Peter, am I missing anything?
Well, and we have, after the hopeful approval, we have a guest here.
An
I wanted to
introduction.
introduce.
Yes, yes.
Even though,
Yeah.
Steve.
Even though we don't discuss them individually, can I say something about one of the appointments?
Sure. Well, I would just caution that there are,
Can we?
if it's an executive session issue, we generally don't discuss individual personnel people in open forum.
Okay.
Thank you. That was the kind of nudge from a former chair that I was hoping for.
Positive or negative.
Yeah. Right,
Okay.
right.
And since, if we have a conflict of interest with one, should we abstain?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not conflicted about him, I like him, but I don't think I should vote. I feel like it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, so for the SLP, at the ACSD level, is that a new position or a replacement position or backfill?
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, can you ask it one more time? Yeah, for the SLP, is this a new position or is it a question?
Yeah, so we have had 2 vacancies in our SLP for quite some time. And we are very happy to announce we've hired 1 person.
Okay.
We're working to hire a second.
Okay.
Maybe more fully staffed for next year.
Okay, awesome.
And they're starting now? No. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joanna.
What's the calendar span for this list?
These are for next year.
These are for next year that were just hired in the past, like since the last board meeting or since the chair?
These are for next year, so they're being hired now for next year. So these are contracts that are coming early, not with the kind of renewal process, which is coming in about a month, but these are just before that. So they're either new hires or folks that were on a 1-year only.
Okay, got it.
Hired after June, and then they have to go through an interview process after their first year and become kind of quote unquote permanent.
Got it. Are we anticipating a list at every meeting, or it's just?
Not every meeting. We'll have one meeting where we'll have all of those renewals, so that'll be, 200 or something. Yeah, occasionally you'll be getting these, but not every meeting.
Lindsay, did you have a question?
I wanted to say that I'm happy to see this, to have the board involved with hiring people with professional licensure. That was something I wondered about, that in one of our policies that the appointment of licensed employees will be made by the board subject to the nomination of candidates by the superintendent of schools. So I'm really glad to see this. It's the first time I've seen this in just over a year of meetings. And I want to say that I would like to see this more frequently. And it would even be helpful to know a little bit about the individuals that we're hiring. And it does specify just licensed employees. So I sort of wondered about that. So thank you for introducing this to our process.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the professional appointments as listed? Steve? Sure. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. Dropped that word for a second. Anyone? No, great. Abstentions? Any abstentions? Yes, 1 abstention. And this actually, this discussion just triggered that I wanted to make mention of board committees. I should have done it up top after we voted on the chair, vice chair, and clerk. But for committee appointments, so we have this year Finance Committee, Facilities Committee, Community and Engagement Committee, and not a Negotiations Committee. Just 3.
Policy.
Oh, and a Policy Committee. Thank you, Mary. Sorry. Policy, 4 committees. So if you could, in the course of this week, send to me your top 2 or 3 choices. I will have committees appointed by next meeting.
Question?
Joanna first and then Brian.
Wondering about adding an equity committee to support the equity audit work that's being done. And wondering with the FMP wrapped up, is there a need for that still? And just, wanting to talk about other
Yep. I think that the work of the facilities committee will sort of shift into looking at bonding, secondary school bonding, and sort of what that process and procedure will look like. So there is still work for that committee to do. I actually don't know in terms of adding committees, how that happens.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be a board.
So we could put it on the agenda as a discussion.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Mary
sorry, I'm
Heather.
jumping in without being called on, but my suggestion would be to bring it to the executive committee
Right.
as a suggested agenda item, and then it would be something that the full board could discuss. Does that sound like the process that would?
Excellent process.
Okay.
Excellent process.
That's how it's happened in the past.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
the committees have received a charge from the board
Yeah.
as to what their work is, so that, yeah.
Exactly.
Brian.
Yes. In the course of these meetings, after you have a discussion on an item, and time goes by, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then you have a light bulb go off that indicates that maybe you should have asked a question that just occurred to you. How is that handled?
So I would say two ways. One, you can have a conversation with somebody after the meeting or outside or whatever, or we have a section called other in the agenda. But generally an agenda is there to move the board along from topic to topic.
It's a good idea.
Barb.
Yeah, more a process question.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the process for determining, we'll give our preferences. What is the process for determining who's on what committee? Is that done by the executive committee?
I think in the past it's been done by the board chair.
I think the policy states.
Policy
chair.
There's the board chair. And so I think, as we've done in the past, to have a mix of representatives who come from small towns and large towns, and sort of considering people's skill set and the load of that committee, how many people should be on it. Those would be the things that I'd be considering. And of course, what, a person's preferences.
Right. And also in our policy, it actually has a standing nominating committee, which I've never heard us having. And the purpose in here, it says board members to nominate board members for committee assignments and for annual officer elections. I don't think we've ever
Since
done
I've
that.
been on the board, we've never had a nomination.
Yeah, so the policy is quite in sync.
And it is being discussed.
It is in this discussion right now. We're making some edits to that one,
Okay.
which we will bring to the full board for discussion. Probably in the next couple of weeks.
Sorry, I could have put them together. Why is there not a negotiation committee in here?
Oh, because
We currently have multi-year contracts.
the wonderful work of the past negotiations committee means that there's no need this year.
Not for a little while anyway.
Yes.
Heather, did you?
Yes, I did. I guess I'm thinking of this because of Jen's need to abstain from the appointments, but I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up or question it. I'm thinking about, I guess, potential conflict of interest, things with respect to committee assignments. I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking of your position, Joanna, on the Clifton School Board, and whether or not there are any potential. So I guess it's a question that I feel like should be addressed or resolved before, or at least that we have an understanding of what what matters are sort of kosher for a board member of another I mean, this is such a funky situation that I'm not really sure how to,
I mean,
I guess I'm wondering whether we should seek a legal opinion on it. I'm fumbling over this because it's an issue that I think potentially could come up. And I'm just thinking about it in terms of.
I mean, I think what the board could do is to direct Peter to seek counsel on what would be considered situations that would be conflict.
And I guess I have a question whether this has ever come up before for like, even for, you know, our representatives who serve on other boards. Have there ever been sort of matters where but it's.
It hasn't. Not on this board anyway.
Actually, it has, but.
Oh, yeah, yes, but.
Yeah, so I think what we should do is start with the actual policy, because it's actually pretty detailed. We have a policy on what constitutes a conflict of interest. So we really, I think, should start there and see, you know, maybe we put it on the agenda or whatever, and you know, we bring a review, because I think
It is in our review package.
Yeah, it's pretty detailed. And
the A6?
I believe it's A6.
It is.
Yeah, I didn't find that it was very detailed. But I mean, we could start there.
Yeah, and then ask for legal, I think, because that's money, right?
Well, when we review things, sometimes we do send them off to legal.
Yeah.
If we're looking for guidance.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that it should be done in a timely manner so that we can make appropriate adjustments on committee, or I can make appropriate.
Yeah, it's just.
I would just say, just again, as a point of order.
Yep.
This isn't on
Put
the
it
agenda.
on.
Okay.
And all you were really doing was saying, hey, please send me your.
Yes,
interest.
that's what yes, okay.
Okay, so then I'll just ask the exec, or I'll ask to put it on. I think that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Or look at it more as a policy discussion, I think would probably be the best route.
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so where are we? We passed, Peter.
Well, I don't want to go by the.
Oh, yes, we're not going to go by the professional appointments without a very special guest.
Who wants to go?
Oh, hello, I was making a joke with them.
So, can I?
Please.
Okay.
You have the floor.
So I'm so excited to welcome Yarki. Some of you may know him, some of you may have had students who went through his class. Some students here may, yes?
Yeah.
So maybe instead of me talking, you two are right at the ground level. Tell us about Mr. Sears.
Nothing like being from.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can go.
Mr. Sears is a wonderful teacher. I've had his class now for the last year and a half in global politics. And just an example today, which illustrates how good of a what are you being? Principal. He's just so conscientious of the opinions that he knows students will have in class. He's so good at navigating how he knows the students so well that he knows how they'll approach certain topics. So he's just so good at making sure everyone knows that they're welcome to express how they feel without being judged for it, or he just knows his students so well that he will be awesome at dealing with all the things that he'll have to as a professor.
It makes them feel safe.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Marcus?
I had him last year, history teacher, and that was definitely difficult because it was during like the year we were only going 2 days to school a week, and I think it was great because that was one of my most consistent classes that year, and I think what Henry brought up was really true, was that he really knows how to navigate a lot of different personalities and students with needs.
Yeah, and I'm a parent of a student in this class, and I would echo the same things I've heard from my own son, who, and lots of other kids that I've talked to who, as they watch you go into leadership, are going to be, it's going to be a bit bittersweet because we're losing you in the classroom.
It's also a good football announcer.
Well, you're
He's
not
got that.
gonna
He's got that.
Yeah.
Good job, Claire.
Hockey too.
I have to keep my connections. I'm
Yeah.
beefing that up.
Yay!
So we put the kids on the spot, but Bjarke would love to hear about your motivation to move from a high school social studies teacher into the principalship.
Sure. Can I just do it from my seat here? Sure. So, it's something I've been interested in a while. I enjoy teaching. I hope that's something my students can feel every day. But I think there are limits to what a teacher can really do, the way teachers can have an impact. I came from a very small school in northern Vermont. Actually, I went to 2 small schools in northern Vermont. And I've always felt the role that a teacher had in those small schools was outsized compared to a teacher in a bigger school. You end up taking on a lot of roles because you have to. And then being for what was for me comparatively a bigger school, I like to think that I could, handle the between the walls well. But I've always wanted to do a little more. And I remember in a conversation with Bill Lawson years ago, we had a great relationship. And I said something to Bill about, Bill, I really think, and he looked at me, he goes, Bjarke, someday when you're principal, you can do it that way. And he said, that's what somebody told me, and now I'm telling that to you. And I said, okay. I went back to school a few years ago to get my master's in leadership. Did that in a couple of years at Castleton. It went great. Really, I've been kind of waiting for the perfect job. I wanted to come at it from a position of strength because I have a fantastic job right now that I think most social studies / individuals and science teachers in America would die for. So I was in a great position, but I feel like I saw one that I felt was the principal equivalent of that. And so I jumped for it. I'm particularly interested in rebuilding connections with the community. After 2 years, it's not anyone's fault. It's COVID's fault. But there's been a lot of barriers. I know as a parent of elementary children, well, now one elementary child, myself, I haven't been in my child's school in the last year. And it's going to be really important to rebuild that. I'm also very excited to have a staff that is, for probably the exception of one new hire we'll have, very veteran. And I think it's a great spot for a first-time principal to come into, to be able to learn from them, really listen to them. My goal is to really facilitate their work the best I can. And I feel like as a teacher of 16 years, but also somebody who's looked at things from an administrative perspective in various roles, that I think I'll be able to balance that. I think hopefully they already trust that I'm coming in with their best interests at heart. I listened closely to what Christina was saying tonight, and it made sense to me. And so I'm just really excited to be your Salisbury principal and really keep the great work that Fernanda Canales has been doing to not only continue that great work, but really work with the community, the staff, and the children to identify what's gone really well, what they value, but also look with a critical lens at what we can continue to do better. So I'm just excited to do that.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much.
Hiring committee for giving me a chance.
Super exciting. All right, are we ready for the report of the superintendent? Or Lindsay has her hand raised. Did Lindsay? Just it's tiny.
I raised my hand so long ago, I don't even remember what I was going to ask at this point.
I'm sorry.
It had to do with when we were talking about the committees and the policies. Mary Gill said one comment that I was going to say that the policy is under review. Joanna made a comment about ad hoc committees, and as far as getting things on an agenda, I share that. I would like to see an ad hoc committee formed around the strategic plan for equity. And I would also like to suggest an ad hoc committee for staff retention or some version of that. Staff appreciation, retention, something like that. But that's all I remember.
Thank you. And now, without further ado, the report of the superintendent.
This is sounding big. I have to come up with something grandiose here. So you all saw in the board report that things are really changing in schools, and a lot of activities that have been on pause that we haven't been able to do are slowly making their way back. I'm definitely sensing over the last couple of weeks in all of our schools kind of a dropping of shoulders and kind of a softening into, and of course the announcement about mask optional has I think been a big part of that. We have a lot of catching up to do, as Bjarke mentioned, in terms of connecting with community and bringing communities back into our schools, not to mention all of the recovery work that we did incredible work on last year, thinking we were in recovery this year, only to really be on recovery pause for another year. And so we're really ready. Our students are ready. Our students are really in need, and I think it's going to take us some time to really figure out, along with all the different positions we're adding and all the other things we're doing with additional federal funding, looking at where we are going into next year, that we need to continue to really kind of assess where students are and I think be adaptable. So that I don't think we have that figured out yet. I don't think anyone does. I think it's going to take time, and as the legislature looks at funding and looks at how they're going to help districts transition, and right now they're talking about withholding the excess spending threshold for another couple years, I think with the intention of looking at what the needs are in schools and understanding that what schools carry, and we've talked about this here many times in the past, what schools carry is so far beyond the academic realities that were, like 30 years ago, schools were primarily just solely funded for academic realities. And now the pendulum has really, really swung, and we realized coming out of the pandemic that the needs of students, the needs of staff, the needs of everybody, and it includes everyone in our communities. It has to be a process where we're all working together, not just one section of our school system. Schools can't be taken out of our communities and expect that we can kind of do all the work there. So I think it's big work, and it's exciting in looking at where we are with our strategic planning and the timing of that. We've been gathering information. Joanna mentioned the equity audit. So we just finished that first part of gathering information, and our advisory committee is working over the next 3 months to reach out and really, really make sure that we connect with all in our community, not just those that come to the table or know how to get onto Zoom, but those that we don't normally hear from. So that is a real commitment going into this summer. And then when the handoff comes to the board, we're going to be looking at what are we going to be doing, what are we going to be committing to as a district and as a learning community to address all of those issues that I mentioned that we absolutely need to, and our students need that from us. I did invite Kelly Landwehr tonight to talk and share a little bit of an update on health and safety, as that's a big item. And something I'm kind of talking about as I talk about kind of the state right now on 314. And Kelly, do you want to just give a little update on how things are going, how school went today?
You're saying little, it's not so little though. I know, poor Emily's been trying to teach me to be succinct.
Okay.
I'm gonna go a little rogue tonight, so. But I do have a lot to share, mainly because I'm so proud of our district and everything we've done. So
Awesome.
Just want to share some info and stories. So thank you all for letting me be here. I haven't had a chance to share information with this group and be with you, and I really appreciate it. First I want to say thank you to the school board and to our whole school community for the work that you've entrusted us with and the things you've allowed us to do. And So really appreciate the school board's role in all of this. 2 years ago, we were just beginning to hear about this new virus. Is it easier if I stand up there? Is there anybody cranking their neck or? No, okay, all right. So 2 years ago, we were just beginning to hear about this new virus called COVID-19 and wrap our heads around what it really meant. I clearly remember the day that we were shutting schools down and how surreal this felt. It truly has been a journey with ups and downs, moments of hope, such as last summer when we felt we may be able to return to school with some normalcy, only to have the Delta variant force a change of course, causing us to return to school this fall with a robust set of COVID mitigation guidelines in place once again. And then the holiday season came around, accompanied by the Omicron surge. We returned from the December break dealing with more cases of COVID than ever before in our district. And now, as quickly as it came, the Omicron surge has plummeted, and we're seeing very little COVID activity in our schools, and COVID activity in Vermont and across the country is dissipating quickly. Yes, it's still here, and it will continue to be here. We will have more variants that we will face, and some may require significant action. Our district will continue to constantly be on guard and look to our medical experts and others for guidance should the landscape of COVID change and warrant further changes in our schools. What's different and encouraging now is that we understand this virus more, and we have not only knowledge, but tools to fight it and protect ourselves. We're transitioning from treating this virus as a pandemic to an endemic virus, much like influenza. We have a vaccine that's extremely effective in protecting us against severe disease and death. We have new treatments for varying degrees of the virus, and we have mitigation factors in our schools that make schools a place with the lowest levels of COVID transmission. On that, CDC Director Dr. Rachel Walensky recently stated that the overall risk of severe disease from COVID is lower because of widespread immunity provided by vaccines or prior infection, improvements in testing, and accessibility to new treatments. We're in a stronger place today as a nation with more tools to protect ourselves, she said. The CDC noted that people who are at higher risk for COVID or those who live with people who are at high risk may still want to take extra precautions, including wearing masks regardless of their own community status. On that note, one of our biggest COVID guidance changes to date happened today, with our ACSD schools transitioning to having masks be optional. Along with this significant change, most of our previous COVID guidance will be a thing of the past. What will remain are a few of our most important COVID mitigation strategies, requiring staff and students with COVID-related symptoms to stay home and test negative, have significant reduction in symptoms and be fever-free before returning to school, requiring those with COVID or close contacts to follow the current guidance from the Vermont Department of Health on isolation and quarantine, and maintaining strategies to improve air quality in our buildings, and also providing home test kits to staff and students. Long-term mask use comes with its own potential risks. In addition to preventing routine social and academic normalcy, early data has suggested that masks can hinder learning and development in young children, especially those with speech and hearing impairments. For many reasons, it was time to transition to masks being optional in our schools, and the decision to do so was done in a thoughtful manner, again looking to our medical community for validation. Today, we celebrated choice in our schools. We celebrated having the choice to wear a mask or not. We fully recognize the magnitude of the mask optional change and how it will be felt differently by us all. This change allows us to explore our own feelings and our own level of risk and make the choices that are right for us and our families. We've worked with students and staff and shared resources with families that emphasize our commitment to establishing a culture of acceptance, respect, and kindness around these choices. Misconduct of any kind will not be tolerated and will be addressed as any significant disciplinary issue would be. Historically, when we've been faced with pending COVID guideline changes, our district has always worked with our COVID recovery team to process these changes and come up with a plan and guidance that is in the best interest of our schools and prioritizes the safety and well-being of our students, families, and staff. A crucial aspect of this work is looking to our medical community and experts to be sure they support any of these changes, and this approach has served us very well in our district. Every change, whether big or small, is important, and our approach to decision-making and creating guidance for our district has remained the same. This past Tuesday, we hosted a community conversation welcoming all in the district to ask questions and share their thoughts. We were joined by some of our wonderful local pediatric providers, as well as Dr. Benjamin Lee, a pediatric infectious disease specialist at UVM, and Dr. Becca Bell, a pediatric intensivist at UVM and president of the Vermont chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. They spoke about the history of COVID and where we are now, and they shared the much needed science that our district needed to validate yet another change in COVID guidance. Not only are these professionals on board with our current handling of COVID in schools, but others are as well, including our state epidemiologist, Dr. Patsy Kelso, and our state health commissioner, Dr. Mark Levine. I have experience with all of these professionals, having crossed paths with them, not only now through COVID, but in the 10 years I worked at UVM as a pediatric pulmonology nurse practitioner, and I have the utmost respect and trust in them. According to the Vermont Department of Health, schools remain one of the safest places to be because we have mitigation measures in place that you won't find cumulatively anywhere else. This includes monitoring those in the building for illness and sending them home with COVID symptoms, and attention to indoor air quality systems and running air filters in schools. Most have been incredibly supportive of the decisions we've made in our district as we navigate COVID. And some have been critical of our decisions when it comes to COVID, and this is okay. Some believe the decisions we make are politically motivated or that we don't care. We have always welcomed different perspectives and fielding the challenging questions. That being said, as the COVID coordinator in the district and as the leader behind all of the decisions when it comes to navigating COVID, I've never made a decision based on politics, nor will I ever do so. I'm a nurse and a medical provider, therefore I make decisions based on science and because I care deeply for the well-being of everyone in my charge, including all ACSD staff, students, and their families. I can also say with the utmost confidence that our district leaders, school nurses, and all who are a part of our COVID recovery team, and hence part of the decision-making process around COVID health and safety guidelines, have never swayed in their commitment to doing not what's expected or popular, but what's right for everyone that is affected by these decisions. We will continue this commitment as well as our commitment to transparency and clear communication. Superintendent Burrows and our school principals quickly met the call of COVID and have educated themselves on all things COVID, and their leadership has been incredibly impressive and reassuring to me as not only an ACSD employee, but as a mom of 3 students in the district as well. There's no doubt that Mary Hogan Principal Jen Kravitz could give me a run for my money in COVID jeopardy any day of the week. The time and effort behind the scenes that has gone into this work is unlike anything I've ever seen or experienced. I'm extremely grateful and proud to have been a part of this district and doing this work for the last 2 years and would not want to have been anywhere else. I also want to thank our school board again for supporting this work of our district leaders and COVID recovery team. A lesser known fact maybe in our district may be how well represented ACSD has been and will continue to be at the state level through COVID. Superintendent Burrows is the president of the Vermont Superintendents Association, and I'm the president-elect of the Vermont State School Nurse Association. I was also fortunate to be part of a school nurse advisory group that met on a regular basis with Education Secretary Dan French, as well as representatives from the Vermont Department of Health through COVID. These associations have given us a unique perspective of how things work at the state level and allowed us to a seat at the table where we have been able to actually be instrumental in some of the decision-making. I'm also pleased to continue on in the advisory group and have also been newly nominated to join a Vermont Education Recovery Steering Committee that's being formed with the purpose of giving input into state level education recovery activities related to academic and social and emotional needs of students, and to help coordinate state level activities with district level activities to maximize alignment and impact. I can reassure everyone that our district will not be complacent and get too comfortable as we continue our commitment to looking out for everyone. We will continue to constantly be on guard and look to our medical experts and others for guidance should the landscape of COVID change and warrant changes in our schools. Thank you. Thank you.
that you are the consummate professional, and when COVID hit, the role of school nurse was elevated to like the leader or co-leader of the district. And you took that on with such calm and sort of operational precision and consideration of your students and staff and families. And I know in my own family, when your, updates would come out, I'd always be a little bit of nervous, and then I'd read them and I'd think, it's just so clear. I don't have to do any thinking here or worrying, because there's been someone else who's done all the worrying and thinking and strategizing for me. So as a parent, I thank you. But also as a board, to know that there was someone who was so able, taking care of us all, really has meant the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I think the video, that was excellent.
Yeah.
And because a couple meetings ago, I said, when we talked about this happening, let's make sure that people feel comfortable keeping their mask on too. And so the whole concept of choice that was there was perfect. So I appreciate that. So that was good.
Thank you. Do you have more?
That's it.
That's it. All right.
Can we ask, I know.
Questions. Yes, I'm sorry.
Question for Peter.
Questions, comments, yes.
Peter, I'm just, if you don't mind, I know you didn't specify this exactly in your report, but I'm just curious if you could give us just a touch point on some of the goings on at, some of the schools that have required some extra attention. And I'm thinking specifically moms, because that's where I've spent a little time.
Yep.
But if you could just kind of update the board on that, particularly since we have some new board members.
Sure.
That'd be really good.
Yeah. So I would say the last 6 weeks or so, a lot of work has been happening at moms to look ahead and think about what next year looks like. Typically, we do that earlier. We do that around budget time, and given everything that was going on, it wasn't going to be possible to get a fully fleshed out model for next year that responded to some of the needs that we determined were really important during this current year. So over the last 6 weeks, Mike Dudek, the principal, has worked with staff to figure out what the teaming structure will look like next year, what kinds of supports will be needed, what a schedule looks like that will be kind of build off what was learned this year in having students have more time, have less time that's not scheduled, so more scheduled time. Really looking at some of the social emotional needs of students and looking at changes there. So they're at the end of that process right now. I think they're mostly there in terms of looking at what that model looks like. One of the big things was moving from 3 teams to 4 teams. Caitlin and Nicole have helped immensely in that process too. I know Caitlin has charts that live in her head, and she can like look at something and see charts. So she's been instrumental in helping to figure out the scheduling and how things fit together, working with mom's staff. And yeah, I mean, and it's just kind of continuing to lean in and make sure we have the right kind of model going into next year that people can get behind and feel confident in. And I think Christina mentioned it well in terms of culture. And the big thing going into, I mean, this isn't going into next year, it's just work that's happening now too, is building a positive school culture. And when you experience what I think moms experienced with the behavioral challenges that were present in the fall, and Steve, who was a sub there, can speak to that well as well. the work that needs to happen now is rebuilding that culture and building a positive culture where folks are connected, are trusting, everything is kind of working in a way that supports both students and staff and community. The parent group has formed and they are meeting, I think, monthly now and maybe more, and working on ways to bring community in. That's a great step. It's something that Moms has talked about for years, and it's great that's finally come together. So that's happening as well. Caitlin, Nicole, anything to add in terms of kind of the model going into next year and where things are?
I mean, the faculty looked at a couple of different models for next year. They looked at both a 5-team and a 4-team model for next year and landed on a 4-team model for next year. And I think that it's a significant incremental step forward. And I think that they will, have some more reflecting and designing to do in the years to come as they really land where they mean to be. But I do feel really hopeful that they were able to find a schedule that answers some of the significant concerns that Peter already spoke to. That some of them in terms of having more fully scheduled time, less sort of amorphous time in a day. Teachers will be teaching fewer sections than they are now. They'll be teaching smaller groups of students. So instead of 120 to 130 students over the course of the year, it'll be more like 90 to 105 in the most recent model that I've seen, which is a significant improvement. So I feel hopeful. I think that they, will need to continue that work going forward, and ideally through establishing that culture and really doing that work collaboratively.
And then just to follow up, I mean, obviously that's looking to next year and kind of making improvements structurally next year. How are we doing with the things that have been, kind of the intervention mitigation measures for this year? And
so that
doing fine.
Yeah, I mean,
Things are better. Are they working? I mean, lunch seems better, but that's just a very small window. What I
mean, I think, if you walk, having walked the halls there for many weeks over the last year, it's definitely feels very different now. So the intensity that I think hit a crescendo right around the Thanksgiving break is definitely gone. And we pushed in, and I've shared this with the board previously, we pushed in and were present in, the central office was present at Moms for a number of weeks, pretty much full time, to help with some of the systems work and other things to help to really kind of bring the energy down. And I think we're able to do that. One of the things that came out of that was looking at some schedule changes. One thing was looking at the SRS, which is the response system, and looking at how the not central office, but the office works with behavioral issues that are happening in the classroom, and making sure that there is a shared culture across the school so teachers know what to expect when students go down to the office. All of those kinds of things are systems that we worked on. I mean, I think Mike's probably a better person to talk specifically about where things are in terms of the work that he's doing right now. We also put the other thing that happened, around the new year was the creation of the engagement program, which still continues and has been helpful in meeting needs of students that weren't being successful in the general classroom. I mean, I think the real work now is after all that happened, is to come together and to heal and to move forward together. I have concerns, I think as Betty shared in her comment earlier, not just at Moms, but across the district. And I hear this from other superintendents too, that people are really fatigued and tired. And the concern about having enough people come back, just having been through 2 years, really, and this is not true of just teachers, this is true of staff, it's true of administrators, it's true across the continuum.
Yeah, great, yes, and that's a real concern I have too. Having been in the school, I hear so many people, saying, oh, I'm not gonna come back, I'm not gonna come back, and I'm just so concerned about that. And I'm wondering if there isn't something that we as a board can't put a little more focus on, having maybe an ad hoc committee kind of focused on, like Lindsay said, teacher retention. One idea might be just to have board members just go into the school and let them vent. There's a lot to vent, and we're hearing you, we understand, and we care, right? Because I think they feel really burned out and isolated, and they've had a lot of weight on their shoulders. I mean, they're brilliant people. I'm just in admiration of the people that I've had the pleasure to work with. And, so that's been a blessing, for me. And just a few, the limited exposure I've had, man, I walk away from there so exhausted. I've never been so exhausted, spending a day anywhere. Being in that environment, and as a sub, it's even harder because you don't have the norms, you don't have the relationships and the trust, which is lacking, for the students. So you do tend to get a little bit, but I've sat in on their classes as well as a helper, and I see similar things happening there too. So it's hard. And I think I would love to see as a board that, we could be that sounding board for them. And I've even had a couple of them say that would be, mention that would be a really great thing if we'd be willing to do that, and maybe that would help us to retain some of the, because losing that expertise, God help us. God help us. And so to me, between the students' emotional, because I see a lot of that. And also the teachers, I think needs to be like a really top priority for us as a district and as a board this year.
I'm also hearing from a lot of people that there's, an exit.
Yeah. And
some are planning an exit.
And people
And
have
I'm
been
really
taking
worried
their
about
kids
that.
out of the school. And, people that I'm shocked that they were actually, basically reconsidering where they're sending their kids.
Right.
And so I think we're kind of in crisis right now, but, and it's not the blame of any specific thing, but the pandemic has really exasperated everything, right? And so I think we have to pull out stops like we did before, but maybe focus in this arena. And I would support that wholeheartedly. I would, put extra time in, to help in this arena if I could.
Any other questions for Peter?
Well, actually, as a point of order, the agenda is set for 20 more minutes. Can we move through the agenda and somewhat limit how much discussion we have?
Yep,
Because-
just,
Thank you.
I was gonna ask if there's any more questions, and we'll move on to the report of the board.
I just had one specifically looking at the board materials, and it has to do with Michael Lennox's report from Shoreham. And this might speak to process a little bit. It's all color coded. What I think I get out of it is that there are going to be 2 teachers in one classroom. One's a special educator, but I don't know who all the names are. So is the process to have a special educator be the classroom teacher?
Are
I
you
just don't
talking about
understand the blue and the pink and
Yeah,
the
let
green.
me take a look at it.
There's
Just
some
was
transition in
wondering
the
about
fourth grade
process.
there.
Yeah, I think he was highlighting what
Oh,
they were
he's talking
doing for
about,
the new
yeah.
model for fourth grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically a split right now. So a number of people are pushing into the classroom.
And some of that
What's
is in
the
response
reasons?
to a teacher a teacher needing to restrict her time in the classroom, so it's.
The classroom teacher?
Correct.
Why is the classroom teacher needing to restrict her time in the classroom?
I think that's personnel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to report of the board. In this piece, we're gonna do nominations of what we do annually. So if I could have a nomination for the Hannaford Career Center Board Representative. The floor is open for nominations.
I would like to return.
And well, if we're doing a formal sort of nomination process here, I would certainly nominate Suzanne for returning, given her 3 years of service. I mean, that leaves us with one opening, and I think it'd be good to know who would be interested, but I already chatted with Steve. I know he's interested, which I think Steve would make an excellent appointee to the Hannaford Career Center Board.
Great, and you would be interested?
Absolutely, yes.
Is there anyone else who's interested?
Who did he say? I didn't hear the name.
Steve Orzek and Suzanne Buck. Okay, so.
And I guess just to let people know, we have another appointment to the Hannaford Career Center Board. We appoint an at-large member, not a member of the board, but somebody from within our, a member of the public from within our district, which I think will come up at a future
It
board
was
meeting.
done last year.
What's that?
Nick was done last year. That appointment was done last year. It was for a 3-year appointment.
It was, okay,
Oh,
thank
great.
you, thank you, all right. I thought that was Amy Woman.
Okay, so all of, so we have a motion on the table. Can I have a second for the nomination of Steve?
You get 3 of them, pick one.
There we go. We got all of the seconds we need. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for your continued service.
Thank you, Suzanne.
All right, can I have a motion or a nomination for appointment to the MCTV board? Kurt is here. If anybody has any questions or comments about that, what that requires.
What does it require?
First of all, who is it? Is the
Yeah.
first question.
First, let me give just a real quick nutshell of what we provide to ACSD, I think. People mostly know us for being on the other side of that camera and broadcasting school board meetings. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. We film graduation every year. We filmed football games when there could be no audience. We filmed basketball games that winter as well, boys and girls. We thought was really important. We started with football. That was all we could pull off at the time. But we really wanted to do equitable sports coverage that we could. We filmed school plays in the absence of audiences, concerts. I run 2 after-school programs at Mums, Tiger TV, and First Lego League, which is a little bit more of me wearing a hat at the library. I work with school librarians, been a mentor to elementary school students in animation, work with sophomores on their independent projects. So there's a lot of stuff that MCTV provides to ACSD students and staff. The board representative to our board helps sort of make sure that ACSD's needs are met there, and is a way to both communicate outward to the community what's going on at board meetings and in the schools, as well as maybe an avenue back to the board. We have monthly meetings that currently meet at 9 o'clock in the morning on the second Wednesday of the month. That's up to sort of board scheduling discretion like your board is, but that works for us since a lot of evenings we're out filming things. It works better during the day for staff to be there. If you have any questions about that, I can answer them.
Our current rep is who? Somebody else.
Amy was our current
Right.
Oh, she was.
rep, so we are in need of a new rep. Is there
And
anyone who'd be
Amy
interested?
was willing to continue if there was not a board member. It does work ideally having a board member in that role. She was also on the community engagement committee It's kind of a natural flow of information outwards. So.
Is there anyone interested?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Great.
Great.
So that was my question, does it have to be someone from Middlebury, because it's Middlebury TV, but
No,
clearly.
no,
the
we
community was doing it.
we have 2 channels that reach Middlebury and a little bit of Waybridge. Our internet presence is much bigger and goes all the way to Shoreham and the rest of the world. But yeah, you don't have to be a resident of Middlebury to be on the board, and we've always looked at our service territory as congruent with ACSD.
Great. All right, so.
Somebody needs to nominate Barb?
Well, she can nominate herself.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So all those in favor of Barb being the MCTV board representative, please say.
Oh, no.
Just waiting
Sorry.
for Lindsay to return.
I'm not sure that we had an official, well,
Lizzie's hands up
Lindsay, okay.
We lost.
on here.
Oh, okay,
I can
okay,
see her there.
great.
So Barb, I'm gonna put you as making the motion.
I'll nominate it.
Perfect.
And so is Lindsay's
Seconder?
hand
Her
up for
hand
a
was
question?
up for, her hand was up for Barb.
Oh, great.
My hand was up for Barb, but I also see Logan Price has been pulled over as a panelist.
Yep.
Yep.
Is that for the next agenda item?
Yes.
Okay, just.
All right, so all those in favor of Barb as our new MCTV board rep, please say aye. Terrific. Thank you very much for your service. And the next, everybody saw in the board pack, we have both the bank account resolution and invoice payment authorization to approve tonight. Why don't we get a motion on the table, and then Logan can speak to.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Suzanne, second. Logan, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're acting on here?
Yeah, I'll try. The board resolution highlights who's able to act in the case of a necessary urgent payment that's required. It suggests a choice of one of 2 board members who can act, 2 board members who jointly need to act, or any 2 board members who can act, again, in the event that there's a need for a quick turnaround on a payment. The second one, the invoice payment authorization, lists all the bank accounts and who's authorized to act on those accounts.
Great. And can you tell us historically on the bank account resolution, what we've done?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask. I was, I'll confess, I was at my home tonight.
We've always
You know?
had it, everybody.
Yeah, which is any 2.
Any 2.
Any
It
two.
happens that over the
Yeah.
past couple of years, it's been the finance committee that's done it. Part of that's because of COVID. In the past, and it's honestly easier, we know people are doing it rather than having to recruit people. Although there is something benefit at times for people looking at it. But that's your own interest. But it's always been that any 2 of the entire board.
Okay, so the recommendation would be to continue in that vein and have any 2 board members be indicated on that resolution. And then for invoice payment authorization, do we need to put a?
I think we've also traditionally done any 2, haven't we?
It says that on.
Yeah, that's my.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Are there any questions for Logan or Peter on this? No. Okay.
Lindsay's hand is up.
Lindsay.
Just wanna make sure.
On the board resolution, with the list of accounts, when it says number of signatures, is that from the authorized signatures by position title or board members?
From the authorized members by position title is my.
So the treasurer, business manager, or superintendent can write a check from the general fund operating checking with just by signing their name. And then Is that typical? What type of oversight is provided for, some of these larger accounts? I know that the finance committee reviews bills, but it seems like that's often done in blocks or chunks or like categories.
When we review bills, we're reviewing all the bills.
So you guys go through and look at every bill and check aside from like the credit card invoices?
Yes, but for this is sort of standard protocol, and how the district has done it for as long as I can remember.
And regardless of the amount of the check, I'm not familiar, I haven't seen this before, but I guess I'm just wondering, like an amount above a certain, dollar figure or.
If it's not stated in the document in front of you, no, there's no dollar amount.
Some of these are probably small funds, but yeah, I'm just curious about that. It just seems like for a larger account or a large fund that you'd want to have 2 signatures on it. Or like one of the authorized signatures and a board member or something.
We have, the auditor provides direction to the district in terms of safeguards, and one of the safeguards is that costs that are above $50,000 need me to approve them, and it's not just the business manager. So we do have, the auditor does look at all of those procedures, including the board's interaction with the finances to make sure that everything's above board, and we have not had any findings over the last many years.
All right, so do we have a? There's your motion. All right, all those in favor of the bank account resolution, invoice and payment and authorization approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great.
I would say Google lateness, that we do a Google poll for the retreat.
That sounds like a good idea. We are, as is norm, at the beginning of each new session, we plan a board retreat and training. And so I will send out a Google poll to see what might work for people, but typically it's, in terms of the board training, it'd be sort of a couple hours in an afternoon. And there's a consultant, Jackie Wilson, who's recommended by the VSBA. He does a lot of board training, so we were going to invite her to join us and lead us through the board training exercise. Super. So with that, how about a motion to move into executive session to discuss contract issue?
I move that we move into executive session to discuss contracts.
Thank you. Second.
Lindsay, I'll be sending you